All right, welcome back to another exciting episode of Metroid: Samus Returns. Sorry?
I was gonna say I can't believe the baby's following us to the elevator, no less.
Yeah, the baby follows us through elevators and teleporters. The baby goes everywhere. What did we name her? Michaela?
No, I think we called her Amelie. I'm not sure. It's like there was definitely a name that we came up with.
Yeah, I'm gonna say Michaela for now.
Michaela.
That sounds like a name I would have given her. Two things about this video is that first of all, it doesn't. We're just doing a collectathon. It's 40 minutes of collecting all the power-ups that we missed.
Cool.
So that's exciting. Yeah, we're here for all the good, exciting parts. This is the part of the LP that everyone loves and was looking forward to, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And the second thing is the raw video that I had recorded was 2 hours long, and I had saved multiple times through it. And only after I recorded it all did I realize that I was not capturing audio. So what I did was I just took soundtracks from Metroid: Samus Returns and I just overlaid it onto this video.
Honestly, I think that was a better choice.
Possibly. Otherwise, we're just kind of cutting in. Well, I mean, we're still cutting in and out of the music a whole lot, but there's no ambient noises to distract us from the music of the soundtrack.
That's the whole point.
Yeah, the soundtrack is pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, when it's there. Most of the time, it's just kind of like ambient noise.
Mm-hmm.
But this song in particular, and there's also another song coming up in Area 6 or something? It's the Sanctuary one, the one that looks like Sanctuary from Metroid Prime 2.
Yeah.
That one had good songs.
So
anyway.
So wait a minute. So I noticed you're not playing just one track. You're changing it up as we go. Like when we go to Area 1, you're playing Area 1 and all that stuff.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to do. Like we're in Area 2 right now, I believe, and I was supposed to be playing Area 2 music. I did it to the best of my ability, but I also was lazy, so...
I was going to say, you're already going a step beyond, honestly.
Okay, so we have 40 minutes to talk about whatever the hell that we want.
And I'm betting you already have some idea of what we want to talk about.
Well, I do have a couple. Well, we're at the end of Metroid: Samus Returns, and... considering that we've gone through the entire game, we've beaten all the bosses, we've beaten all the Metroids, we're collecting all the shit right now. I think it's finally at that time when we can say that we are capable of forming an opinion of Metroid: Samus Returns and how it compares to other Metroid games and how it compares to its direct fan-made competition, another Metroid 2 remake.
Well, I was going to say, you don't have to play the whole game through, but I get what you're saying, that it's a more complete evaluation, right?
Alright, so I did have a small list of topics that we could talk about.
Oh, so it's a bit like what you did for the other M video, like.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. For the other M video, at the end of the game, when we were doing the exact same collectathon that we're doing right now, except another M, of course, we had a list of topics that we just went through while we were just watching the same kind of video where it was just me running around collecting a bunch of garbage.
Unnecessary garbage for that 100% completion rate.
Well, I mean, in this game, there's a little bit more to getting a completion rate. We get the chosen memories.
Right, I forgot that was a thing that they're trying to emphasize here.
Okay, so the first thing that we can talk about, and it's the easiest thing probably because it's the shortest list that I have here. What did we like about Metroid: Samus Returns? What did this game do correctly compared to its direct competition and compared to itself on the Game Boy and other 2D Metroids? What did it do right? What did we like?
Well, I like the fact that it didn't... This is the thing I was telling you earlier, like a couple of videos ago, that at the same time I appreciate that they're not going... You know what you're getting into when you get this game. But I will say that despite its lack of use of Aeon abilities in anything but puzzles, and unnecessarily sometimes at that, I felt that Aeon was done alright. Combat-wise, I think the game is maybe slightly improved. I mean, I'm not the one playing it, you're the one playing it, but I feel like combat-wise, it seems pretty, like, kinetic, and it seems less like wait and stand to shoot, and more like you can take your time, not take your time, sorry, but you can more like actually take the fight to the enemy and be like, if you attack me back, I'll just keep on rushing you, you know?
I do have a counterpoint for that, but that's actually for the other list that I have here, and we're talking about the things that we liked about the game.
Okay, well, I'll say, you know what? I'm saying this now. I mean, it was hard to hear the music through our commenting, but I'm liking the music. The music, they did well.
Yes, that was one of the other things that I had written down here, is that the music feels very Metroid Prime-y, and I mean, we both hold Metroid Prime in such high regard that anything that is like Metroid Prime is just immaculate, right off the bat.
Yeah.
So anything that Metroid Prime does, or anything that any game does that feels like Metroid Prime is just automatically good.
Well, I was gonna say as well, like the backgrounds here are gorgeous. I mean, that's another good thing that they did well.
Yeah, they really handled the aesthetics of Metroid Samus Returns really well. The music, like we were talking about earlier, it's mostly ambient, like right now, but it does give you the feel that you're just kind of in a cave, and that you're just, like, you're alone, and the only company that you have is a bunch of indigenous life forms that are trying to kill you.
Or at least they're just living around and you're the one killing them.
Yeah. On top of all the Metroids. Like, you really get the sense that you're alone, first of all, and you really get the sense that it's not a hospitable planet for humans, or anyone, really. I mean, the Chozo were here, and then they dipped for whatever reason.
They had their reasons.
I'm sure they did.
I was going to say, though, you're saying what makes it compared well to AM2R? Honestly, I think AM2R's bosses were more inspired, and the exploration in AM2R felt a bit more inspired, too. Like, this game, like, it did the Metroid fights well, but I still think the AM2R's Metroid fights were more claustrophobic. You know? And the fact that the combat was so, like, heavy on the... You know, like, you could easily kill the Omega with a power bomb, and that's kind of like, oh man, really? Is it going to be that easy to destroy it? Whereas in other AM2R, like, it was much more difficult. And in this game, it seemed like you only had really difficulty fighting against the Omega Queen, or the Metroid Queen, after you got the hang of the other bosses, especially Billy, you know?
Right.
So...
I can't remember if the Queen gave you more trouble than Billy.
No, Billy took a bit, but eventually when we realized we had to bomb him and we were just avoiding his lasers, it felt like Billy took longer, but the Queen was more like, God damn, I have to actually take my time and be careful here, kind of thing, you know?
Right.
But yeah, that's my take on it so far. What do you think?
I think Metroid, or another Metroid 2 remake, I think AM2R did... Honestly, they did so many things differently that it feels like a different game altogether. Like, even though these two games are a remake of the same game, it feels like that they aren't. It feels like that AM2R is just a completely unique fan game, and Samus Returns is... I want to say it's the more loyal of the two remakes, which is a silly thing to say when you take Aeon into account. But AM2R introduced so many new unique things, like fucking playing as the side hopper. That blew me away when we first did that. And there was the escape scene in the tower when we blew up their reactor core, and then we had to fight a tank on our way out, and then we were too late and we got blown to pieces. Like, all that shit, that's all purely aesthetic and everything. Well, no, that's not purely aesthetic, but it all just adds to the game in a way that Samus Returns didn't. Samus Returns did a bunch of things differently from Metroid 2 for the Game Boy, like Billy, for instance, the Aeon abilities. But was it enough to compare to AM2R, and were they as good as AM2R's additions? And I want to say that AM2R... Bleh. I don't know if this is really fair to say that one is better or just more entertaining than the other. On top of all the aesthetics that Samus Returns does, like, it goes above and beyond for the graphics, it goes above and beyond for the music and for the ambience and everything, whereas AM2R consists almost entirely of ripped sprites. I mean, not to say that there isn't original work in there, but, you know, one of the reasons why they got slapped by the DMCA is because they're using Nintendo assets. I don't know. I don't know which one I like better.
I mean, I guess they're both like you can say you appreciate them for different elements, right? You can say I appreciate AM2R for its uniqueness and making a different style of Metroid, where you can say for this game, and you keep screwing that up.
I'll get it.
Whereas for this game, you can look at it and be like, this feels more like a natural Metroid. Like you said, it feels like a more what you'd expect a Metroid to be. Whereas AM2R was more like somebody having fun and saying, how can I make Metroid unique enough to be like not the same as all the others and yet still be my own touch, you know? I mean, you can see, like I say, like I think AM2R at least had that benefit of being from a different, I guess I want to say developer, quote unquote, you know, and being the fan. Whereas Sakamoto is more like, I know what I like and this is the way, and we all know what we get when we play Samus Returns.
Right.
And AM2R is like a guy going, I'm going to make it a little bit different. I'm going to get a different idea of how things should be done in this game. And I think that's where the difference lies. It comes down from a distance of perspective of what Metroid is, or what it could be.
Who do you think went for what it is, and who do you think went for what it could be?
Definitely Sakamoto went for what it is. I mean, I think, what was it the guy's name again? Not Mega 64, what's his name?
Well, his screen name was Mega 64, but his real name is Milton Guasti.
Okay, I think that Guasti, or Mr. Guasti, wanted to get, like, Metroid for what it could be, because his point of view of Metroid is like, it can be so much more. And Sakamoto, I think, was not... I think that Sakamoto was cautious with this game, because after Other M, I think that Nintendo didn't want him to push the envelope too much again, you know? Not until... And I think that's why, like, even with Metroid Prime 4, the devs are going like, we can't, let's not use Team Retro, because maybe they're thinking, we don't want more of the same, and yet at the same time we want to go with people who are trustworthy.
By the way, I'm going to interrupt you just for a second.
Yeah?
It was revealed who the developers for Metroid Prime 4 was in between the episodes here that we were doing.
Wasn't it Bandai Namco or something?
Yeah, it's Bandai.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what games Bandai Namco makes, but all I know is that they've made a couple of JRPGs and fighting games, right?
Yes. They made Smash 4 for one.
Yeah.
They didn't make Soul Calibur. They did Pac-Man. They own Pac-Man.
Right.
They're a trusted developer. Let's just put it that way. They do make a whole lot of good games. They do know what they're doing. But I don't recall off the top of my head if they've ever done a game like Metroid Prime. So I'm optimistic but cautious.
I mean, we know what happened. I know that I said, hey, when Team Ninja was announced and everyone was like, oh my god, Team Ninja. And yet we can place the blame on Sakamoto for being the fuck up he is. And I think in this game, like you said, he reined himself in. And I think that maybe he reined himself in a bit too much, gameplay-wise. Because, yes, I can understand Nintendo not wanting to risk their IP and just saying, like, I do not want... we don't want people to... we don't want people to get a little bit too uncomfortable with what Metroid was because of Other M. But I do think that still, like, playing it safe kind of made the game less special, because it's like, okay, like I said, we've already played this game,
Right.
We've played it before, and AM2R was going at least for something new. Even though you've played it, it's got more than just Aeon. It's got environmental stuff, like that black and white, that dark area where we're trying to, like, through the biodome or whatever.
Right. I do remember that. I remember saying I'm nervous. I didn't want to keep going. It felt like as close to a horror game as a 2D game could get.
Exactly, and I think that's what I think that AM2R is trying to go for a kind of a fusion-esque approach to Samus 2. Whereas this game, I think it feels a bit more like Super Metroid than anything else.
Was all of that part of the thought that you had that I interrupted, or?
No, I'm just kind of mentioning it through. I mean, okay. Like, I'm just mentioning things as they come to me when you're asking me to compare the two,
Right. Okay, so in that case, I guess if we're done comparing the two, at least for now, Here's a question. What did Samus Returns specifically do that you might not have liked?
That I might not have liked. Like I said before, I think my big complaint here is with the misuse of Aeon, of what it could be.
Right.
To make, I understand, yes, making some enemies only weak to Aeon, with the rapid fire burst and all that, but I feel like Aeon could have been much more than just an exploration tool. It could have been a combat tool for all of its abilities. Like, imagine when you get the scan pulse, and then you have a boss who doesn't seem to have any weaknesses, but then you scan pulse it, and then it pulsates where you should be shooting it, Even if that was completely unnecessary, I think it still would have been a bit of a, like, damn, what's this boss's weak point? Let me use my scan pulse to find out. I think the beam stacking is also another kind of missed opportunity, in the sense that beam stacking, except for the exception of the ice beam, it feels like the ice beam was a bit more of an afterthought of what it could be, but everything else is like, you don't have to worry too much about yourself. You can just blow it all up, with your single big mega stacked laser, and oh, here's an ice beam a couple of times for the Metroids. And yes, I know I said earlier that having the right tool for the job is important, but for some reason, I don't know, it feels like the ice beam was the only one that could do that, and the Aeon abilities were doing nothing. And it feels a bit like a missed opportunity there,
I kind of, like, do you mean that in general, or do you have some specific instances in mind?
Of the, of what it could be? Like, of what the...
of just, like, missteps with Aeon.
Like, okay, let's look at... The big one right now would have to be the time slow mechanic. What is it called again?
Time slow,
okay. Think about it, like, slowing down time. Imagine making an enemy that was, like, even a boss that was super fast. Like, he would, like, dash left and right, and he's literally unhittable unless you slow him down. And even then, like, sure, we get Aeon from countering, but you could also, like, make him bring up one of his attacks, or maybe he spits out a gob of, like, rocks or something, and you blow up the rocks, you get more Aeon to use when he does his super fast ability or something. But I think that the bosses could have been a good approach to make the Aeon abilities super, super special. And I don't think they did that. I think the Aeon was more like here's a thing that you could use, maybe you don't have to, but then why have it in the first place if you're not going to encourage the player to use it more, Right,
I understand. One boss that is canonically a thing in Metroid is the boss Samus.
And who's that?
Samus was in Fusion, and he was actually in AM2R, and he was the super fast boss. He was the dragon, the water dragon.
Oh, okay.
And when you beat him, you got in Fusion, you got the speed boost. And
makes sense thematically.
yeah. And in AM2R, when you beat him, you didn't get anything, but he was the first boss that you fought after you got the ice beam. So if they had reintroduced Samus into Samus Returns and encouraged you to use the time skip or time stop ability in order to combat him, I think that would be really good, because this game doesn't have speed boost, right?
No, it doesn't.
Like, you wouldn't be able to keep up with him. So you would use the time thing in order to just slow him down and make the fight a whole lot easier.
Right.
Or you could just not do that and have a bit of an extra challenge. But either way, it's just to give you an incentive. Like, here is a tool, and here is a reason for you to use that tool just immediately. And they didn't really give us that. Like, in this game, whenever you got an Aeon ability, it was at the very beginning of an area, and then they said, go nuts.
Right.
They didn't give us a situation where that Aeon ability might come into use other than the puzzles, like you said. Like this one puzzle that we're looking at right now. This one involves the time skip ability, but it's not combat oriented, and it's just an optional puzzle. It's completely optional. I have no reason to be here other than for whatever ability or pickup I'm about to get.
Right. I mean, here's one thing. Yeah, I was going to say, to add that to that, like, yeah, I don't have anything, there's nothing wrong with making puzzles based around the Aeon. Like, I think that's perfectly acceptable as far as it goes, but the game should be a blend of combat and exploration, and when you're just limiting these brand new tools, and like this enemy disables your Aeon abilities, right?
Right.
Like, that should be a big fuck, he turned on my stuff. But your lasers still work fine. Your gun still shoots. There's no reason for you to need it. Like, another way you could use the ability, like you said, a time stop for that boss. Another thing, like the lightning armor. It's basically another layer of protection to protect your health, and it's like an oh shit button. I'm about to die. It's like you press that and you take some damage. You take some loss of damage. I think that an enemy or a boss that, let's say that we coded its lasers as green, so green means lightning. That means that you always would take damage. It's unblockable like lasers, but if you have the lightning armor, it absolutely does nothing to you. Like, it may not even take up Aeon. It's just like, you can keep the Aeon as it is, or the ability as it is, that it covers you and protects you, but when he uses that green laser stuff, or that green beams, that's when you need to turn the lightning armor on and weather the storm. And if you don't have it, you just gotta dodge it. Otherwise you're gonna be taking some huge hits,
Right.
I mean, I'm just trying to brainstorm other uses for Aeon that are more combat-oriented, because I'm looking at it the same way as I look at Zelda. Because I think it was, I think Yu Raptor, his whole thing about how Zelda feels more like an amusement park than an actual exploration game, like the more recent ones, and how he was trying to say you should try to mix combat with exploration and make the combat be focused around that, rather than have dedicated, okay, this is the exploring time, this is the combat time. And I always thought Metroid had a good approach to do that, of mixing up combat and exploration by weaving it into the actual area, like this place. You see this dude in front of you? You see this little guy going into this little hole, but you could go through that hole and you can avoid that guy. It's all part of it. But I think more and more the game is trying to separate itself and being like, okay, now it's exploration, now it's combat. Anyway, I'm talking a lot. But what do you have to say about this one? About Aeon?
Well, actually, to add on to your they should marry combat and exploration a little bit, one thing that I didn't like too much about Samus Returns was the aiming capability, where you hold down the R button and then you can just aim in any direction that you want. On the one hand, like, that's very different compared to traditional 2D Metroid games, including AM2R, where you can only aim in 8 directions at most. Like, in this game, you have a full 360 degree of motion. However, you have to stop your exploring. You have to stop movement entirely in order to access it. You are locked in place as soon as you press down the R button. And I didn't really like that, because it felt like it was going against just what made Metroid feel like Metroid. Metroid was all about running and gunning. It was all about marrying the exploration with the combat, like you said. Like, Fusion did it, Zero Mission did it, Super Metroid did it. This is the one game where, like, you are locked specifically in looking into one direction while you are moving and shooting. And if you want to look in a different direction, you have to press a button, and that button press stops you from moving entirely. It took me out of it a little bit.
Okay, I was gonna say regarding that though. I mean, other Metroids did the same thing, but if you wanted to aim diagonally up or down, you would, you hold a button and Samus would just lock into that view. But I think that this game actually did okay with the 360 no-scope shooting, if only because the enemies do move around a lot. If you kept the same enemies like that, and they kept moving left and right and up and down and all that stuff, then you would need a 360 aiming. Otherwise, you'd be like, God damn it, this aiming sucks, because, this enemy is like slightly at an angle that I can't aim at. So, props at least to the designers for making the button, or at least making Samus move 360, even if she has to stand in place to do it, because the enemies move that way. Now, does the 3DS have the hardware necessary to have 2 sticks? That way you could run and use the other stick to look around, or is that just the Wii U?
No, there is a Pro attachment to the 3DS that came out when the 3DS was first released, and you could fit it onto the back of a 3DS and it would give you a second stick. I remember it was really recommended for Metal Gear Solid 3DS. So the hardware is available,
but it's not required.
It's not required.
That's why I could see why they would want to not do that requirement. But if it were possible to play that way, to have 2 sticks, and that second stick would be free aim and the other one movement, I think it would make the game a little bit more fun to play. Regarding your complaint.
What I think they should have done is they could have, well, it's not should have done, but one thing that they could have tried to do is offer free aim with the touchscreen, which is why it's there, right? Like the same deal that Metroid Prime Hunters did, where you could move around and maybe you could jump with the L button, and if you put the stylus to the screen, then Samus would aim in whichever direction you're moving with the stylus.
Wouldn't that be a bit awkward, though?
It would be, but no more awkward than Metroid Prime Hunters was, I think.
Well, here's the thing. Metroid Prime Hunters was designed for you that you could either play touching the screen, or you could play without it. But when I played Metroid Prime Hunters, yeah, it was a bit of a different experience, but in the end it became like, oh, okay, this makes sense. Because I think games that use the D-pad or the analog pad and the 4 buttons plus the shoulder buttons, and it forces you to use the screen at the same time, not good. I mean, I played the Beautiful Joe for the 3DS, and I could not get past the first stage of how bad the controls were. Okay. I actually gave the game back. I bought the game because I was like, ooh, this looks like fun. I gave the game back immediately because I was like, this is not fun. The controls here are not good.
Well, I'm just saying it's a thing that they could have tried.
They could have tried, but I think maybe they tried.
I don't know. Maybe they did. Maybe they did on the design floor or whatever.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know. I wasn't there. It's just, I don't know. I think this is just where we're gonna have to agree to disagree on this part. Sure, the free aiming gave me a whole lot of control when it came to when I wanted to shoot. When I wanted the minimalist, not minimalistic, the minute precision that comes with free aiming, with total free aim control. Mm-hmm. That would be great and all. But it took away my mobility, and anything that makes me slow in a game about running and gunning is probably not good.
Yeah, no, I can see your complaint there. I can actually sympathize, because yeah, if a game that's all about fluid movement suddenly grinds to a halt and it's like, there, you have to stop now. Unless the game was designed in the first place to be like that, like let's say Resident Evil 4, where you can't run and gun, but when you do gun, it's actually it feels very very nice. Right. Then it's done right. Otherwise, it's like you have to, marrying the two gets a little bit tricky. Can I just say, by the way, I love how Michaela is just dutifully following us along this entire time. Yeah.
Michaela, she's a little trooper.
I was actually going to say, I was about to call her Sam, short for Sammy, because like Sam is Sammy. But I was like, no, Michaela's just fine. There we go, puzzles.
What were we talking about? Standing still.
We're just talking about the controls, yeah. Standing still.
Well, more than that, actually. Things that we didn't quite like about Metroid Samus Returns. One thing that I wasn't... Like, I thought about this midway through the LP, and I said that I do have a thought about it, but I'll share it towards the end of the game to see if they fix it. Yeah. And they didn't. One thing that I didn't really like about this game was the counter mechanic. The huge draw to the game, to the gameplay. The thing that separated it from all the other Metroids. I didn't like it, and it just reeked of Sakamoto's influence. It's basically just a shittier sense move. Like, as soon as the enemy does something, you press a button to react to it, and then you get a full charged counterattack, which is precisely what Sense Move does. And even...
No, hang on a second. Sense Move was, like, broken, easy to exploit.
Sure, it was, and that's why I said it's a shittier Sense Move.
Oh, okay. Go on.
I think the counter would have been great if they used it more for boss fights, and if they made the boss fights... If the boss fights made you choose between trying to get the counter and getting the full power counterattack, or just keeping on and pelting the boss full of lasers. As it is, every single fight that involved the counter mechanic involved you sitting still, waiting for your enemy to strike, and then countering that. If what they did instead was they weaved the counter mechanic into the boss's regular movements, and just made it like, say I'm fighting an Omega Metroid, And the Omega Metroid is, as in the game right now, as it is right now, the Omega Metroid is it's standing there with its jaw open, and it's leaning back a little bit, and then I see the white flash and I hear the sound, and then I know to press the X button. So let's say instead the Omega Metroid is swinging both its arms at me, it's firing its laser, it's swinging its tail, and somewhere within that friggin' mess I see the light and I hear the sound, and then I realize, oh, I could stand here and keep pelting, and then like halfway through the pelting I can press the X button to counter its attack, and then I have even more firepower in play, and that's really exciting because I'm also trying to manage my movement, and I'm trying to manage my damage, and I'm trying to manage my own health, versus what is currently in the game, which is stand there and wait for Omega Metroid to do something, and then I press something to respond to that. As it is right now, Samus Returns, the counter mechanic, it feels like it's turn-based. It feels like I'm playing an RPG.
So it's like stand there, wait your turn, use it now.
Yes.
Like timed hits from Super Metroid. Super Mario.
Well, yeah, I guess I was gonna liken it more to like Final Fantasy, where it's very purely my turn, your turn.
Yeah.
But Super Mario RPG or Paper Mario, those would also be apt comparisons. I dislike that counter was basically a necessity early in the game to fight even the weaker first level enemies. And the reason for that is because in earlier Metroids, that didn't really matter. I mean, I just went in and I kind of shot my gun and I ran straight through them. This is just more talking about running and gunning and me wanting to have a more excellent fast-paced time.
Yeah.
Versus me taking my time and picking my fights, etc., etc. This is just me personally. Like, maybe people prefer the more precise approach, where you stand still and you wait for the enemy to come to you and then you respond effectively, versus the whole Rambo thing where you just go in there guns blazing and then you fuck up whatever dares approach you.
I think just to point out here, I think that both approaches speak to a different type of Samus. Like, I think Other M was your more Rambo-y gunning and shooting and sense moving all over the place like a ninja, but it wasn't done well.
No, it wasn't.
Whereas I think a game like this, where you're saying, okay, I'm going to stand here and wait my turn and swing back at you, yeah, sure, it feels extremely like, what do I want to say? It feels very like turn-based, but at the same time, it says that Samus is the patient person to be like, I'm not going to just be wildly swinging at you or shooting at you when it's not necessary. I'm going to be methodical.
But at the same time, I guess this comes down to, like, we've had this discussion probably half a dozen times in this LP by now, but what kind of character is Samus? I mean, the one thing that we know for goddamn certain is her attachment to the baby Metroid and her decision to hand over the baby Metroid to the proper authorities in order to advance humanity's understanding of Chozo technology and how Metroids work. What do we know about her specifically other than that? Is she the running time?
From the games or from the media?
From I guess just from the games, if we're not counting the comics or anything. Even though the comics are kind of important because they do tell us her relationship with Ridley.
Yeah.
But just in this case, it would be for the games. What do we understand about Samus? Is she the run and gun type, or is she the slow, methodical type? And that comes down purely to how you played the Metroid games when you were younger, and how you chose to interpret her character through your actions as a player rather than through Samus's.
That makes sense.
And because of that, that's where we're coming to the discrepancy here, where you think she's slow, or at least you may argue that she's slow and methodical, and I think that she's actually run and gun, Rambo, kill everything type. Not to say that I agree with her characterization in Other M, but that's a whole other can of worms. So yeah, that's why I don't like counter.
Yeah, okay. The counter sucks for this reason, this long reason. We're nearing up the end of our journey here. Anything else you want to mention?
I think I already asked this at the beginning, but did Samus Returns do anything better than AM2R? Did AM2R do anything better than Samus Returns? Yeah, I think we already talked about this.
We've already answered. I think that they're two very different approaches to the same style of game, and I appreciate both of them for what they are. But I think it's about time. I mean, I appreciated watching you play this. I know we're not quite done yet because we have the credit sequence and all that to go through after this. But I appreciate it. I think I appreciate it for what it's trying to be, but I think it's time. I do think it's time for Nintendo to look and say, where can we take Samus from here? It's been more than 20 years that Metroid first came out, and it really hasn't changed that much until Prime. And after that, it's only been two different types of games. It's been either your 2D side-scroller, or it's been your Metroid Prime.
Or Other M.
Or, well, let's not talk about that. Well, you know what? No. Actually, let's just mention that formula didn't work out the way it was meant to. Maybe there's a chance there. Maybe there's a second more story-driven approach to take, and in the right hands, it could be good. Maybe.
Maybe. I said this before, I think in this very LP, and I'll say it again. When it comes to gameplay, just purely gameplay, for Other M, it was a solid 5. And you'd think a solid 5, a perfect average, would be like neither an insult nor a compliment, but it's 100% an insult.
Oh yeah, for Metroid? Yeah.
Yeah.
You expect more.
So I don't think Other M is exactly the direction they want to take. They tried to take, like you said, Metroid at this point is either 2D or 3D, and Other M tried to do both. It tried to make it both, and it failed at both.
I'm just curious now to see where... I mean, are they going to take it anywhere? Is there a future for Metroid that's not this?
Well, I guess you're going to have to ask Bandai that.
Well, it's Metroid Prime 4. I mean, I'm assuming that it's going to be like more of the first-person exploration, which is good and all. We could use another one of those that's not fucking Federation Force.
Right.
But, I think even then, there's got to be room for a little bit of more creativity, a little bit of room of new ways to look at this franchise. That's all.
Right. I mean, who knows? It's done by not only a completely different company, but by a completely different culture. Bandai is Japanese, Retro is American. Mm-hmm. And we'll have to see. Maybe Japan. Like, I'm not Japanese. I don't frequent Japanese forums, but maybe they have a completely different understanding of Samus and her series than we do.
Well, hopefully they're not going like, yes, Sakamoto's vision was true. You know? Because then it'd be like, oh no!
I remember seeing this one fan comic that someone did of Metroid Other M. And I gotta say this quick. Do you remember that scene in Other M when Adam shot Samus in the back with the ice beam?
Yes.
Someone did a comic where they shot Samus... Never mind. See you later.